Good morning. This is MJ from Linus Publications, and today we're going to finish up part three of the 2026 elections. Now, we have the part one that was back in April. We have the part two that I actually did yesterday, and that was the progression. Part one was the transits. And today we're going to look at the solar arc. And there are a few points that I want to cover on this. And some go back a little ways, but most are pretty much right around the time of the election. So, starting off, what I want to point to is this right here, Pluto. Pluto had moved from the ninth house into the 10th house back around, 10 years ago or so. In fact, it made that move on 2/26 of 2016. What's Pluto? That's power, manipulation. 10th house, it's status in the world. And in this case, it's a country chart. It means, in effect, the office of the president or the administration. Pluto, in effect, was moving into that office. And that is about the time that it was known that Trump was going to probably be the Republican candidate. And this was one of the things way back in 2015 when I saw this. I thought, oh, Trump might actually win. This was one of the reasons why way back in 2015 I decided to stop doing corporate charts and, in effect, stock market charts and move to political probabilities, in effect. It was because when I saw this, I said, oops, I need to write a book. I need to write a book that talks about this guy, about Trump, and why he is probably not a good fit for this place, even though I probably knew it was going to be useless. So that's a little bit of my story. In fact, Trump got me into writing books about political probabilities and moving in this direction. And it was because I saw the characteristics in him that were not suited for the office that he was going to hold. Pluto is going to be in this house for approximately another 19 years. So does it mean we're going to have someone like Trump in there? Well, we're probably going to have people that are going to try and take advantage of the system, yes. Will it be as bad as when Pluto first moves in? Not usually. What happens is you have the biggest effect when the planet moves in. And then what happens is that it's sort of settled in there. It's made the changes. So it usually doesn't tend to get much worse unless it's making angles to planets. So that gives you a little bit of my history, how I moved from actually doing charts on stocks and companies to doing political charts. So let's take a look at the first thing I want to note here. We talked about way back in 2015, 2016. Let's talk about approximately September 2nd in 2024. Right before the last election. We have this, Saturn, actually coming down on Mars, making a conjunction. Saturn, it's a difficult angle for Saturn and Mars. So in some cases, conjunctions might be okay. These two planets are not going to like it. So it's a difficult angle, which brings out what? Restriction from Mars. What is it restricting? It is restricting action. Now let's move to where these planets rule the houses and bring that into the interpretation. Saturn is the ruler of the second house. House of value, of money, of material goods. So now we have wealth that is in effect doing or helping in the restricting. What's Mars here? Mars is the ruler of the fifth house. Fifth house can be corruption, but in this case, let's think states. What was someone doing back then to the states. In effect, there could have been corruption. Could this have been doing something to the machines there, the election machines? And who was showing up around that time? Light bulbs going off. We'll leave it at that. At some point, I may do a book about this and also about the shooting, the first shooting, that assassination attempt that Trump was in. At this point, I'm just going to put it out there so you can make your own decisions and think about that. Next thing we have is 9/24 of this year. We have Saturn now moving to make that square to Neptune. What is this? Public trust just breaks down. Neptune is idealism, things we believe. Saturn is restriction. We don't know what to believe anymore. Saturn is in the 7th house of people, public perception. In effect, Neptune is in the 9th house of legal affairs, also philosophy, religion. So we're left with not understanding or not knowing what is a fact anymore. Now, this has the hints of having some type of crisis. So at that point, we could start having, in a month or so, the first of crises that are starting to show up. This indicates also fantasy rather than reality. Also, looking at national type of narratives and starting to understand that it's propaganda. Just like what's happening with the District of Columbia, where there is no emergency that doesn't exist already in other states. So this is being brought to bear to invade this location with military troops. Now, the next thing we have, very, very significant, because it's happening on 7/3 of 26, and that is July 4th, right there, which is the birthday of the United States, but it's more importantly the 250th birthday. What's going to happen is Pluto, force, comes down on Jupiter. In this case, Jupiter rules the 1st house, force comes down on the people, physical force. So this could be when the administration, and again, hard to say whether Trump's going to be there if it's someone else. The administration is going to say, oops, nope, we're in charge. No more Constitution anymore. We make the rules. It moves into maybe an oligarchy type of setup, maybe a dictatorship, but that's a very significant time. It's going to be a time when we have the erosion, that's Pluto, of Jupiter justice, of democratic type of norms. Jupiter is also national aspirations, and it's going to be, in effect, tampered down by Pluto, coercion. So there's going to be intense pressure right around July 4th of next year. And taking into consideration also everything that was happening in the progression, it's likely to be a significant period. Doesn't mean that things are going to end next year. And this is one of the reasons why I wonder if we're going to have a free, or if we're going to have elections. Because Pluto coming down again on Jupiter here is a pretty big thing. Now, the next thing we have is going to be on January 1st of 27, so right after the election. We have Jupiter here, in conjunct, tough angle, okay, it's a break and adjust, to Saturn. What's Saturn? Again, in effect, that rules the 2nd house of money. Jupiter rules the 1st house. So this might indicate that we're going to have what? A war of the classes. In effect, the common people against the billionaires. Now, that's one indication that could be happening. But it is also pointing to an economy that's in trouble. So it can't expand because of the policies that are in place. So this is a difficult angle. Now, next thing we have is Moon trine Jupiter. Yes, we have a trine. Oh, good. Moon, over here. Coming from the 11th house of communities, hopes and wishes. It is trining Jupiter. What is this? Well, more importantly, this is going to be happening on the 30th of January of 2027. So in effect, new people would have taken office. And because of that, Moon, emotions, Jupiter, national pride, national feelings. We're now going to have some national optimism. So the public, again, Jupiter is in the 7th house, is going to feel hopeful about things. We're going to start to have, and again, Jupiter is aligned with foreign countries. We're going to start to have good ties with foreign countries. Moon, trying, emotion. Collective pride. Moon ruling the 8th house of support. So we now are, in effect, a supportive structure. Patriotism. Not the type that Mag calls patriotism. So is this positive? Yeah, it is. It means that probably whatever they're planning, maybe for this July period, maybe doesn't get all the way through, and there's some hope there. And maybe that hope means that we get enough people in Congress that can stop this. Now, it doesn't mean that the justice system is fixed. 9th house justice system. That needs to be fixed. Can't have things like this happening again. Now, I do have one other little angle sitting here, but that's starting up in 2028. So I'm not going to go into that. And that's actually Mercury square Venus. So we'll leave that for another day, maybe in the 2028 charts. Now, I do want to just briefly mention that the angles I usually touch on are things like a conjunction when they're in the same location, a trine when they're about 122 degrees apart, a square when they're 90 degrees apart, an inconjunct when they're 150 degrees apart, and an opposition when they are directly opposite each other, which is 180 degrees. This is a 360-degree circle. But that doesn't mean that they are the only angles. In some cases, when planet moves out of one angle, it's moving into another angle, but it may not be in a tight enough area yet to have an effect. So pretty much as any planet moves around, it's going to typically be making angles to other planets here. I just don't talk about them. But since we're on a learning curve, I might start talking about them. There are planets that, angles that are related sometimes to a religious fervor, sort of like a MAGA cult type thing, that come into play when you have terrorists that will die for their beliefs. So I may talk about things like that. So that might be coming up. We may also get into other areas where we start looking at what's called the midpoint, where we look at, for example, this Saturn and this Jupiter in the natal chart of the United States actually has a midpoint. And when we have a planet touch that midpoint, that also causes something. So there are a lot of things that are going on in charts that we haven't even touched the surface of yet. But we will. And hope you'll stay around to get to that point. Thank you for watching. And again, pop over to my website, and take a look at the services that I offer. Otherwise, have a great Tuesday. Bye now.